Hello everyone. Today we have Robert Mangurian and Marianne Ray with us. Actually, they have been with us for the last 2 weeks. They have been with us for the graduate architectural design program summer school workshop. And they conducted the workshop, Oda workshop, dwelling for the 21st century. And they are both practicing architects and academicians. They have been directors of SciArc. They're still teaching at SciArc. And they are the founders of the Base Beijing and the Studio Works Architects from Los Angeles. And now we have them. Welcome again.
Thank you. We need to. You can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you think that for that is okay?
Just leave it here then.
For recording,
Yeah.
it's better.
Yeah. It's better if you point it out for the recording.
I see.
I know it's not fun, but
I already have mine.
I see.
So the title of our talk, which continues a little bit what we were doing with the workshop with the Geje Kandu, the title I think is something like Ruralopolitan space, which is a kind of hybrid of rural and metropolis, which is a kind of new space that we feel is part of our 21st century existence together, that we now can have spaces which are a kind of hybrid of rural and urban, which make this kind of rich spectrum of possibilities for new kinds of urbanism. So I guess the other title was alternative urbanisms. And for us, we've gotten very interested in Beijing and Mumbai, and now returning a little bit to Turkey and the Geje Kandu in alternative urbanisms that really spring from the ground up, from people, from communities, in a kind of natural way, and they produce incredibly surprising new possibilities for us. More than we talked about urban planning, more than an urban planning program could ever give us. We felt so much that we learned from this, and it was great to spend some time with the students here in the Geje Kandu neighborhood and start to feel some of that, let it rub off on the architecture. So,
Yeah, maybe a quick thing. It's about your life and so on. Is that when you see a good thing, you're studying architecture, but whatever, jump at it and sort of make it become part of your life. I was lucky. Well, I went to school at Berkeley. Yeah, the school was kind of like, okay. They were sort of leading in design methodology was the big deal at that time. More or less led to nothing, but everybody got quite excited about it. But anyway, and so when I finished there, I knew I had to, because I'd never lived in this place, I had to get out of California and I had to move to New York City. Because that's like the place, the most important city in America, and the things are happening there and so on and so forth. So I did. And then I won't tell that whole story, but I ended up basically working next to, but working in an office. That this is just a completely lucky thing on my part. And two people had worked in that office, and one was still there for a short time, and the other one had left about 6 months before. And one of them was James. They went to both went to Yale. Berkeley was not in the class at Yale. And Craig Hodges was James Sterling's favorite student of all time. He still says this. And Lester was Robert Venturi's favorite student of all time. And so I certainly didn't study with James Sterling and Robert Venturi, but I got this secondary education through them. And sometimes when in your life, these things come up and you just grab it and go for it.
So this is one. This is one of those things. The opportunity came up for us to spend some time in Beijing, and it was right about after the year 2000. And so we were able to have a studio there, and it was independent of our Studio Works practice. It was also independent of any institution or school. It was kind of placed outside of both of those things, where it was a laboratory. We had more freedom to do things, but we did work with students and together, but more shared kind of research and thinking and looking at things. So it was.
And also, this is also something that happens in your life. So we just had to found the studio, and it just happened to be in this little village in Beijing.
What's known as an urban village. So there's the Ruralopolitan right there.
Called Xiaozhengli. But the village turned out to have a number of artists living there. One being one of the most famous artists in the world, Ai Weiwei, who, did he study architecture?
No,
But
he studied art a little bit.
But he does architecture.
Yeah, we'll show you a little bit of his architecture. It's a little known fact, but he actually is an architectural designer as well. So it was just an amazing place we landed in. The studio was in an urban village. What the hell is that? And with these amazing people. And so it's a little bit of a story that unfolds from there. And part of just seeing this incredibly rapid urbanization happen in China, since the new China started, the opening up of Deng Xiaoping, usually we go more into the history, but won't do that necessarily.
Well, except to say that when we first came to Beijing, which was what year?
Well, we were in
In the
1993.
93.
It's our first
No cars.
bicycle.
There are no cars in Beijing. There are no buses in Beijing.
No
No,
restaurants.
I'm sorry, no taxi cabs.
Yeah, no restaurants or shops or,
This is not that long ago.
it was like an ancient city.
Yeah.
And then to watch it become what it has. And, a lot of that urbanization has to do with, this is an amazing film called Last Train Home, and it's about the largest migration in human history, which is the rural to the urban, which has happened all around the world. It happened earlier in America. The Gejikandus are a part of that phenomenon here. It's a story all around the world, yes. And this is an amazing story. It's actually a documentary of one family and how this migration affected the family structure, the architectural space, and everything. So we were meeting migrants and original farmers. And
The birds that are up here are a little bit different. If you look closely, what are they?
What are they?
People.
they have legs.
Yes.
They have legs dangling on the wires.
They're working on the
So
electrical wires.
Yes. So in China,
This-
there are many words for migrants, and some of them are humorous, some of them are pretty tragic, some are respectful. There's a whole language of this. We've collected all these words. But one of the most common ones is yodong bonko. I don't know if it's Chinese, but it's floating population. And so they literally do the 3D jobs, the dirty, the difficult, and the dangerous. They do the work no one else wants to do. And when we rounded this corner, it was like the perfect illustration of the floating population. And so where does the floating population live in Beijing, in the city? They're illegal. They're not there legally in the city. And it turns out their architecture is not legal, but it produces something that we'll look at that's, for us, quite amazing. And so they're called in Chinese the urban villages or the villages inside the city.
Are there villages like this here in this country? They're within the city,
Well,
but
the
it's a
cook-
compound,
the
these
cake-
are people that come from the countryside.
Well, the Albanian village where we had dinner, so the KOY,
Yeah, I know. Okay.
yeah, all the Kuys were formerly villages,
Yeah, they were formed villages.
and then they become urbanized.
Uh-huh.
So in China, in Beijing, they've remained still more village-like and rural, and not sort of been absorbed by the city so much.
Except that the one that we're in Beijing is, some artists started moving there, including maybe one of the
Yeah,
best known people I went away, and they all make a lot of money. So they have limousines.
Well, we have a special
cars and
urban
stuff.
village, right? But you step outside of it and you're in five-star hotel area, except we'll show you the land. This city, Shenzhen, 25, 30 years ago, it was just a series of fishing villages. And Deng Xiaoping, this guy, said, let's open it up to special economic zones. And it's a major metropolis now. But you still, if you've been there, see some people nodding, you still have these pockets where, people more like farmers and rural people live. And it turns out some of this idea comes from Chairman Mao's thinking. His whole power base was rural. The peasants and the farmers were the people that voted for him. So I know here the Gejikandu politicians try to take care of a neighborhood so that they get votes, things like that. Similar, but his power base really was rural. And so he actually encouraged cities to become more ruralized through some of these items here. That one made up, but it turns out he's kind of a radical urban thinker. Radical in many ways. So this is a 1959 plan. There were many plans for how New Beijing would be formed after it went from being an imperial place to then a socialist country, communist country. And yeah.
And these are what we would call rural village. They're outside the city.
Yeah.
The city is growing. It's kind of absorbed them. But you can still see the remnants of them. We live in one.
Those are not newly built satellites.
No. No, in this plan, no. They become, some of them have become new
So
satellites.
the city is sprawling and reach
The villages. But he also proposed that we keep the old city here, that's the historic city, and then we add villages.
Yeah.
And they're three-part villages. They have these yellow things and this bluish and green. It's the only image you can find, it's faded. So this is housing, like village housing, one-story houses, and factories and agriculture. So they're three-part things.
Yeah, it's a pattern.
Pattern. And this is the most radical plan for Beijing, and this is the one that they say was Chairman Mao's idea. He worked with Soviet planners and Chinese planners, famous planner. Anyway, but this is his idea. This is one more Chairman Mao's idea. He also said, if we imagine all this green, that all Chinese cities should have a minimum of 40% greenery coverage. And Beijing, because it's the model city, should have 60%. And so that's a pretty forward idea in 1959 to have about a city. And before the Olympics, leading up to the Olympics, in Beijing, 3 billion trees were planted. And we watched it happen. So there were tree farms everywhere. Little trees, bigger trees. And then,
And fake trees.
and fake
I
trees.
saw.
Okay, so fake trees.
It's crazy.
And it really improved the city. The city is cooler. Yeah. So we found out we were in an urban village. So we said, are there other urban villages? Yes, there are. So in Michigan, we sat one winter and just looked at the map and started drawing and finding all of them. It's really easy to see their pattern from the aerial Google. And we found that there were 800 originally.
But they were not urban villages, but
No,
villages.
Well, they're villages, some had been rural and absorbed,
Like
but
the city.
now they're totally within the city. The airport's right here, the Olympic Stadium's up here. This is the university district, so there are a lot of them there where students live and migrants that service the universities. This is the CBD. This is the old city. So you could see there's especially a lot of them there because they're doing all the service labor in the hotels and laundries, cleaning houses for people. And then the strange thing that you hear with a bunch of rural people.
So we're in we live in our city, was in urban village, and it has that guy on the right, Highway Way, and she
Do you guys
came
know
to
her?
visit.
Do you know her? Martha Stewart? She came to visit to like see his cool lifestyle, document it. And he's standing in front of one of his designs. That's his studio in house. So here's some of his architecture. He was in New York and then he moved back to China. He was living in the historic center with his mother, and he was married. He was nearing 40 years old. He didn't have a job, and his mother said, "Get out of the house, go be a grown-up person, like do something with your life."
Because his father, he didn't come from nowhere. His father was the most famous poet in China.
Contemporary poet.
So he was there.
Yeah.
He was no longer
And
alive.
in New York, he was reading Duchamp and Andy Warhol and kind of soaking all that in. And then he moved back with his mother, and he realized, he said, I just sat around and ate sunflower seeds all day and watched TV and played cards. And then he went with his brother to this urban village because they were looking for a warehouse for his furniture business. And he saw this empty piece of land, and he said to the village leader, "Oh, could I build something there?" And the village leader said, "Well, not legally, but yeah, you can build something there." And so he built a big studio for himself. And then because he had a space, suddenly he could be productive as an artist, and it made all the difference. I mean, architecture made all the difference in his life for now being the super productive architect that he is. But next door you can have a migrant tent. Right? They're taking their nap after their lunch and then going back to the sewer construction, right outside the tent. So here are some of these tripartite things. This one's more on the outskirts, but we'll see some that are further in too. So we can see here is the village of little one-story brick houses. They're kind of scaled like the Gyeje Kondu. Then we have factories, the red and blue roofs, and then agriculture. So this was Chairman Mao's idea. Sometimes the agriculture is fish farms, but again you see factory, village. This one's more urban. Here even some mid-rise housing moves in, but we have still village, agriculture, fish farm, factories. And so if we look at what the role these things play in the city, a series of roles. So that one thing, they're really hidden. Like we had to find them on Google Earth because the government has planted trees and built walls like this. So across the street, there's the same white wall, but it's hiding a golf course and the golf club. And so you think, you're in a fancy neighborhood, but you just move behind this wall, this green wall, and you're in like a rural village. They're urban village. There are donkeys, and the whole operates on an entirely different economy than the rest of the city.
And it's a fabulous thing within the city because people are, probably all the Chinese cities, it goes this way, some people are migrating from the rural area into the city, and these places provide a way in because they can live in these things, and it's not like living in an apartment house. They couldn't afford that or apartment building.
There are no slums in China because of this phenomena, which we'll show you in a minute, like how that kind of happened.
And the urban villages, Barry was saying, they were rural villages. So the people that really been there, families have been there for a long time, are farmers and so on.
So here is CCTV building, which you all know, by OMA. Right in the backyard, those are not there anymore, but they're these urban villages. Here's Nestle's headquarters. The New American Embassy, I think the next slide will zoom in on the New American Embassy. Yes, just to show you what a crazy mix this is. So A is urban village, urban village, urban village. These have been torn down now, but this one is still there. A lot of it's still there. Then there's a expat suburban kind of neighborhood for Americans and Europeans mostly. Here's the new American Embassy. This is former agriculture, which is now a golf course. And this is the Lufthansa shopping center and a 5-star Kempinski hotel. People that go to this hotel, or even people that live here, they don't even, we've asked them, they don't even know this exists. So when I say they're very hidden, they're very under the radar. And we found them first by landing in one and then by Google Earth. And then we're able to enter them and engage them. So as Robert said, one of the most important roles these villages serve in the city is that they absorb and make housing for these migrant workers. And this is the site of a former farmer's one-story house. This is the recycled brick from that house that was torn down. And then they build a usually 3-story building and have rooms to rent out. And then they keep maybe the penthouse for themselves or the roof terrace. They have a great life. They don't farm anymore. The government took away their farming land, so they invented this idea of building this housing. And they call them millionaires in a way, because they went from making $2,000 to $4,000 US dollars a year to now making $60,000 US dollars a year. It's a typical, we have a friend that built one of these. We realized we got in too late. We should have co-invested. It was a better return than any stock market, anything, bonds, whatever.
And they can build one of these things in maybe 3 or 4 weeks.
So fast, so fast. And they're not so bad. I mean, they're not slums, you know. And they're places, you know, the Gejikandu, when they first come to the city, they have to build in one night. I mean, they put everything, rocks under bushes, and their friends help. But it's like they're pushed to, it's a kind of severe situation. They need housing, it's urgent. The migrants come and they have housing. And then they absorb all the knowledge from the city and the economy, they grow with it. Sometimes they go back to the village with that knowledge.
But if they built poorly, some did, I think, the local government comes in and just tears it down.
Yeah, they're not legal. I know, same here, but it's a big seismic zone like earthquake zone like here.
Yeah.
And the rooms we have introduced to our studio, the prevalence around the world for humans to live in 3-meter by 5-meter rooms. At our jury, we talked about that. And that occurs here as well. And it can be a family of 3 or 4 with a bunk bed, or it could be 6 migrant workers on 3 levels of bunk beds on either room. It fits the human body in many combinations. This Ai Weiwei helped us get this map from the city because it's public knowledge. The city has to provide this. This shows what's legal and not legal. So this is a plan of our village. Our studio is right here. Ai Weiwei's house and studio is right here. And everything in gray is legal. Everything in black is not legal. So Ai Weiwei, some of the projects that he built was his own studio. We have a house in this compound that he designed, and this compound, his projects are all not legal. But the interesting thing is that there's a saying in China, it's called the winking owl. Winking owl, so winking is like that. The owl, one eye sees it, and one eye closes the eye to it. So it's a really interesting hybrid, not only of rural and urban, but of top-down and bottom-up. So in our village, there were mosquitoes and bad smell from the sewers. And until one summer, this crew came in and was hired by the government, and they put in separate sanitary and storm sewers and improved the village so much. So they added the necessary infrastructure, because our village went from being legal buildings, this area especially, legal buildings for one family, to non-legal buildings for, you know, how many people, like 25, 30, 40 people. So that we think the population, we asked the village leader, how many people live here? He goes, I have no idea. They're all illegal, they don't register, but it's something like, went from like something like 3,000 people to 20,000 people. So it's a super densification.
That's Ai Weiwei there.
Project. This is the original farmer houses. And these are very close friends of ours. She works at our studio, and she and her husband teamed with a contractor who gave sweat, what they call sweat equity.
But she cleaned our floors.
And our toilets and our
She was a
kitchen.
clean lady.
But she,
Madame Young, beautiful.
Fantastic
Like an
person.
angel.
so her family joined forces with a builder who donated their labor, so they co-invest. So they invest money, but the builder invests their time. And they build these structures, and then they have the penthouse. And
But she,
But they're the millionaires.
yeah,
Yes.
she's a millionaire now. But she still comes to she still likes to be with us and the students, so she still comes and cleans with us. And she talks about being young and raising pigs and farming. And we said, where were you when Chairman Mao died? She goes, I was out in the fields, just out here. And they announced on the broadcast, Chairman Mao has died. They all put down their tools and walk back. So she has amazing stories of living through quite a series of changes. So tearing down, building, and then building is, and the whole city the whole village was chaos. We watched this happen. And the village leader actually asked us to do a tour with him of the village to look at the construction to see if we thought there was enough steel. And you can see, that for a foundation, that's a pretty fair amount of steel. So it's the one I was really looking to make sure these were safe for his villagers. And looking the other way that they were not legal. This construction is familiar to you, but less so to our American students. This is just a kind of little animation of just this chaotic. The whole village was like a big, somebody got the idea and then it just went wildfire. The whole place was like chaos.
but there are probably 10 to 15 artists who are basically billionaires that live here.
With the farmers.
They all sort of ended up here for, because maybe way
I would wait
after
let them build these buildings, which I think we'll show you a few more, but they were studios. They were like New York loft spaces, and there was nothing else like that in Beijing, so I think they gravitated there. So this is our village, Chaozhangbi, and some of our students got housing in a tower, a mid-rise tower right here. So we thought it would be really interesting to compare that piece of land to the fabric of the village. So we cut out that piece of land, and cut out an equal piece of land from our village. And so this is an 18-story tower. I mean, this comparison could go on, but just simply, here's an 18-story tower. 840 people live on this piece of land. And the rental cost per month per person is 1,000 yuan, or 155 US dollars. Sorry, I can't quickly Turkish that. Dollars per month per person. This is 3 to 5 stories high instead of 18. And 3,200 people live on that same piece of land. And the rental cost per person is 10 US dollars. And yet they're right next door to each other. So it's, and you were saying that like, I don't know,
Yeah.
is right next to, like, a lot of the very high class neighborhoods. They're just coexistence. As the guy in that one village told us, it's the capitalist housing. He called it the capitalist. So they offer a kind of density that this kind of landscape, which we call the object building landscape, which produces a land for shadows of buildings. It's about daylight setbacks. It's an entirely Western idea. Bauhaus, Gropius. It produces a space maybe for security guards and shadows, but it's not a space for people. It's not urban. It's not urban. It's not urbanism.
And they in China, Beijing at least, and a lot of the other cities, I'm sure it's the same. The government doesn't. I mean, if you think of the government in China, you think, well, they're in the U.S. we call them commie bastards. But the government doesn't come into these villages and tear it all down and then sell the land to people to build apartment buildings. They you know, they say, look, these people living here, they own the land, and we can't do that.
They take some away, like for the Olympic Stadium, they had to remove a series of villages, but they compensate. And more so now, really compensate fairly. So people are happy with moving here, okay. But the urban villages, so contrary to that landscape, the urban villages also operate this model of kind of really intense social interaction and urbanism. This is a village that houses a group of people that a sociology professor in Beijing called the Ant Tribe. So because they're all students who graduated, but they don't want to leave the city because they have to go back to their more provincial hometown. So they want to stay in Istanbul, same thing. With friends and like here, they would a student, you maybe don't want to go back to Bursa or even a smaller place. So they're called the Ant Tribe because they live so dense, it's almost like an anthill. And they're thriving, teeming, and they're entrepreneurial, and they're doing all kinds of amazing things, but there aren't enough jobs for them. So they live in this very economical, dense situation. This actually was torn down because the government felt this was, to a point, it was too dangerous for fire. Look at the electrical lines. It kind of got out of control. But it goes on 24 hours, the urbanism. So you'll have people that live in those high-rise, mid-rise towers. The minute they get home from school, if they're a kid, they go here because there's a video game parlor. Or they go there because there's a nail salon, or there's a pub, a sports bar. This is where it's all happening, actually. So they provide that role for all the city, really. So architectural production and reproduction, cycles of fake, fake, and double fake. Control C, Control V, and the culture of the copy. So as a
in the culture of China, to copy something that already exists is a way to put praise onto the original. So yours has a credential that's part of that thing. It's not like in America, you wouldn't, copying is considered like
well,
a
Walter
bad.
Benjamin, the what's it called, Benjamin, mechanical reproduction,
Art.
in the age of mechanical reproduction.
Yes.
But just that the copy is considered a degradation of the original. And something we just learned from China. And so we're always talking about intellectual property rights, and they stole the iPhone thing and whatever. But in Taoism and Buddhism a little bit also, but in philosophy, in Eastern philosophy, if you chant something over and over, like a Buddhist chant, or you rewrite a text, or there's the famous temple in Japan. There are two sites, and they build it, and then they tear it down, and they build it. You know that place? It's a really amazing place. I think it's every year they remake it, tear it down, remake it, tear it down. But anyway, it's a kind of, to copy something, as you said, it gives it honor and makes it more valuable. It's not degradation, it's exactly the opposite. So Ai Weiwei calls his design studio fake. This is his address plate. And he likes it because it sounds like F-U-C-K in Chinese. But if you know his work, a lot of it's about duplication. Like he does the Qing Dynasty replica that even the expert can't figure out is not real. And then he sells it with the documentation that says it's real. He plays with it all the time, all sorts of ways. But especially his design and architecture branch, this is what he calls it. So he built these projects in the village. This is a series of houses. We're lucky to have one of those houses. And the villagers started to see these people with fur coats and Maseratis coming in and renting these places. And then they asked, how much is the rent?
Buying something in China is for 19 years.
So
it's basically rent. You have to pay for it all at once, and then you have 19 years. And then you have to buy it again. But you can't own the land.
The land belongs to people.
Sort of not a bad thing.
So the villagers were saying, wow, okay, what's different? So it's more simple, it's gray brick. And so they started to make fakes of the fake projects. So we did a whole series of documentation. This is a real fake project by Ai Weiwei in his studio. This is a fake project. So they started to duplicate it. Real, fake. This one was built, and this guy had already finished his wall.
But this is the Ai Weiwei on the left.
Yeah, this is the real thing. Yeah.
But he made it look like it was old.
Well, it's stepped brick, so then they saw that and they go, wow, that's a really great idea. So they shipped out the brick so they could make it instead of integrating the whole thing. So they reached this kind of absurd scale. And then back to Madame Yang again. So Ai Weiwei actually did a walking tour of the village and he showed us this. He said, see how they faked my project. So he had pointed out a few of them and we started documenting others. And he said, they were faking me so much, I had to make in red brick. I had to now make a new original. So he made the typical construction that the farmer does, but didn't put the stucco on it. And he made it more detailed. It's actually really beautifully detailed. So if we always ask our students, they have to find the real fake and the fake fake. Because the fake fakes have weird gutters, plastic gutters, and bad detailing. But the real one, the proportions, and the detailing is really beautiful. So we asked Madame Yang, she painted the outside of her building magenta, stucco and just bright pink. So we asked her what she thought of that, and she said, it looks a little unfinished, or maybe we asked her, but he did it really, really well. He built it really well, so I think it's really good. So she approved of the red brick. So that was sort of a quick version of this urban village thing. We brought a little bit on Mumbai. But we could do it maybe in 10 minutes. Yeah, sure. Okay.
Some of you will, maybe some of you are teaching in architecture, but some of you will end up teaching in architecture. And so I started pretty early on after I graduated teaching. But I had a student, who's going to help me with the story.
Oh, okay. So at St. Louis University,
I had the student, but he was
Washington
University teaching, and he, which is really attentive and so on and so forth. And then we got a project to help transform the central part of St. Louis into something.
A performing arts center. It was a kind of urban design.
And I asked for some volunteers from the dean of the school, and some people showed up. And one of them was Vijay Jain.
This young man.
And but he just really put out energy and so on and so forth. And so
Well, he said he saw a sign on the wall. He said he was in undergraduate architecture school. And he said, I feel like there's more. There should be more. And so he sees this little thing about someone from Los Angeles coming to teach. He said, I have to do that because Los Angeles, Frank Gehry and Tom Main, and it was the beginning of that, but it was a kind of exciting place. So he came the first day and sat at the table when we were teaching. He told us the story. We didn't remember. And he said, Robert said,
oh yeah,
you can tell the story.
No, go on. No, I said, here's what you'll do. You'll go to school and you pass your courses, and maybe if you really work hard, you get good grades and so on, and then you'll graduate, so you get a job with somebody, and then you work yourself up the ladder in the firm and move to a better firm. And you will go up the ladder, and they're all like, great, I'm feeling really good. And then I said, but if you really want to go for it, you have to start right now.
And he said something just snapped. Just at that moment, something snapped in his head. I got to go for it, whatever that means. So I don't know if any of you know his work. I think we didn't bring any. But he started what's called Studio Mumbai and does this beautiful, beautiful work. He's revived ancient lime plaster techniques and traditional Indian things, but also very contemporary new architecture. And so we're like family now. And so it was so great that he invited us back, the students, to his studio. So when we went, we were not in some school or anything. We were in his studio. And through that, then we were able to explore some of Mumbai's alter urbanisms that were happening right across the street from us and around the corner from us. So if you're a person with less wealth in the city of Mumbai, there are 4 primary ways you might live, and we'll sort of go in order from the most substantial to the least substantial. The first being what's called chawls. They're semi-permanent to permanent, often built by the English for factory workers. So the English came in and colonized and made all the cotton factories, etc. But they're pretty nice, actually. They've been falling apart. They even collapse every once in a while because of the monsoon rain. They're off because they're sometimes wooden. The masonry ones hold up better. But they're these kind of running balcony buildings that work incredibly well with the climate. So they open up in one direction. And there's a kind of light that spills out to these. So we did a lot of documentation of that kind of light that moves from inside to outside.
They have, these buildings are funny. They, they're 5-story buildings, so there's a stairway you go up in the corner. And to get to your apartment, it's not a double-loaded building. You walk on the balcony.
Through
But in the summer, they're actually a fair amount. It's hot, and so people sleep out on the balcony.
Yeah.
So when you're coming home at night after dinner or something, you have to tiptoe over the bodies that are sleeping.
Yeah, Mumbai well, it's hot all year, but especially the hottest time, everybody moves outside. You'll see
Did
this.
you, is the balcony intentionally or
Yes.
just
Yes.
outer circulation?
Well, I think both,
Both.
because there is no circulation in the building.
Yeah.
Well,
So it was.
but I think it was opportunistic
No,
use
it was for circulation.
for circulation, and then opportunistic
Then they
use.
use it. They hang their laundry there, and they eat out there, blah, blah, blah.
And then the second type would be, you would probably call it slum. And if you've seen the movie Slumdog Millionaire, that takes place in the biggest slum in the world. We've spent a lot of time documenting there. The word in Indian, they don't like to call it slum. It's such a negative word. So there is a word, jopatpatis or zopatpatis, they call them. But it is a sprawl of shanty shacks. And this was with the students, we did some mapping of that. So they're 120 square foot house, 120 square foot house. New York Times reported about 3 months ago was for sale for up to $90,000 US. So at this point, they're not poor people that live there. A little bit like the Gejikondu to some degree. I mean, we saw Mercedes parked in some of the. But this is the famous Dharavi slum where Slumdog Millionaire was set.
But the surprising thing is, I mean, these people, the 1 or 2 people in the family work, and they do pretty well. I mean, they're not starving or anything. They're not. Almost you would call them middle class people. They're living here, and they just have the greatest time. The little streets which we could barely see in the women generally don't work. Well, they have jobs of sorts, like doing laundry for people and other things and so on, but they stay there and raise the kids, and the men go out and work and come back. And it's like a neighborhood. That everybody knows each other, everybody takes care of each other and so on.
Our students named it the familyhood, and we saw this very much in the Gejikondu.
Yeah.
The really rich social life. So
The movie Slumdog Millionaire kind of shows.
yeah, a little bit. Yeah, so these narrow alleys, but then there'll be these clearings, and these are very much like you guys, some of our students found, where they're shared by a series of families that open up, the houses open up onto this kind of courtyard. But they're along the way of the public streets, like little mini piazzas or something.
Oh, and then there's one, what is it called? There's one very famous one that was in that movie. Dharavi. And the government maybe got criticized or something, or just felt it's on their own. And they built some housing in North Mumbai for
Like
people that were
the
living.
Toki housing, very similar form.
So they didn't sell the houses, they just gave them the house. And then in the northern Mumbai. And it didn't take too long. I mean, it was not, first of all, you were in northern Mumbai, you're kind of out of it. That was one mistake the government made. And the jobs they had were in Mumbai, so they had to commute and so on. Before they didn't have to do that. And so they started coming back.
They rented out that place and moved back to the city. I had similar stories in the Gege condo in Ankara in the 1993s. They couldn't have a garden, all sorts of reasons. But these guys even told us the young girls get taken advantage of, people die, they murder people, people steal things, there's no community.
This is where
In the relocation housing. Right. And there are different districts they have where places of production. This is there's a whole area that's just devoted to pottery production. This is a kitchen. They're for the most part though the one-room house again, and the one room is sleeping, even sleeping over here, and workshop all in the same space.
Next slide. One of the things in India, they have a holiday once a year for, what would you call it, a goddess?
No, it's a god who became engaged to a mortal woman. It's not a god. And on the night of their marriage, when it came time to consummate the marriage, it was too powerful. God was too powerful for the human. And the story is that she dissolved into a pile of color.
Pure color.
And so they're different origins of the holiday.
So in India, certainly in Mumbai, but in India, like this is concrete and here's metal. There's some nylon. In India, color is a material, and it's just they have one day of the year that's a national holiday.
Everybody dresses like this in white.
And it's for color, the god or whatever it is, the color. And then they walk around with balloons filled with colored water, and they throw them at each other.
Everybody's just psychedelic. And then third, hutments, about 12 feet by 12 feet. They sell for about $16,000 each. You'll see one in a minute. Often registered with the city, so it's semi not legal and semi-legal. They're always built along public sidewalks, usually against the back blank walls of city agencies. So not where there are shops, but like it could be a university. We found them at universities. And then the one we're most familiar with, which actually isn't this one, but they're two-story. It's built against actually the wall of the building department, one of the building department branches of the city. And so they kind of can't keep them out because otherwise they're being rude to a big population of the city. So the color thing is too outrageous. Also.
But you go there if you do go to Mumbai sometime, you have to go to the what do you call them?
They call them hutments.
They take care of each other.
Very tight community.
In all sorts of ways. So that the neighborhood is like a big family.
Yeah, women go out to work because two women can stay and watch all the kids in the neighborhood. They can just play everywhere. There's the interior again. They're single rooms. Sometimes a family has one level and another family on the second. If they have enough money, the parents will live above, and the kids, like 6 kids, would sleep on the floor there. And the lucky ones are registered, so these guys have been here since 1995, so it's an incredibly established neighborhood, and if the government does take them away, they will be reimbursed or given compensation or relocation housing. And they even pay for the electricity. It's a little bit mafia, a little bit government kind of accommodation. And then the third, which for us is, it might be sad at first for you to see it, but it's somewhat poetic, and it kind of, our studio was so much about how little architecture do you make. Some of you guys were talking to the jury, how little do you need to make a room or a house? This is like an incredibly minimal situation. Pavement dwellers. Sometimes it's where there were hutments and the government tore them down, gave them housing. They rent it out, they move back, but all they have is an L. They have a sidewalk, part of a street, and a blank wall.
Maybe the lowest level of the
Yes, lowest level. Yes.
The bottom.
Bottom of the economy, the
Set.
caste system.
Because we got a bunch of students and we got to know the people. And they just are having a ball. They're not suffering in any way. And they, you've seen, and the men go off and work and the women, some go off and work and some stay there. But the women arrange to produce schooling up to a certain age when they're like 10, 12, 14 years to go off to the school.
So they're not homeless people in the Western sense.
No.
They, in other words, let's say when they're taking care of the kids in the day and they set up a school and so on. So they trade jobs and so on, and some go off and do shopping and blah, blah, blah. So they sort of work together as it's not like a family.
It's exactly right. It's not homeless.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a book that our students did about a neighborhood that was right across the street from Studio Mumbai. So like Robert said, we got to know them very well. This is a family that didn't have the rights, so they weren't given relocation housing. So people have different status. We did a series of interviews. Does that sound familiar? Oda workshop? Everyone is family, or brother, sister. We heard that over and over. We asked them, are you afraid? Are you afraid because you live on the street and you belong to them? Their answer was, yes, the municipality, the police come and take our stuff. They came the day before and I couldn't protect it. I have a 1-month-old baby, so how could I leave him? I become troubled by them coming. So the fear and the danger is actually from the scout and the police. Trying to nudge them out, like not kick them out, but nudge them out. This is a very bright girl. She spent a lot of time with her. We know everything here, and our job is here. So we prefer staying here. It's dirty and unsafe in the relocation housing. They kill people alive and hang the bodies from the trees and abuse pretty women. But during the monsoon, we go there because of the wet weather. But otherwise, they wouldn't be here. I'm just this L shape. But for some reason, she wanted to be. The students did some drawing with the kids. So this is the history. So Studio Mumbai had done some documentation. We're almost done here. So this is when the neighborhood was hutments. Then the government. This is the building department branch in this compound behind it. The government came in and tore it down. So here is a few years earlier and the current situation during demolition. You can see exactly the same gate. So what's left is the interior color. In their house, sometimes a shelf on the wall, a clock. And then the difference between night and day, which is a little hard to see, but at night it's filled with people because everyone comes home from the city jobs and they're sleeping right here.
Those buses, they're not moving, I guess.
No, so we asked about those buses, and we were told that there are often buses that don't work, that the city owns, and they park them there to give shade. So I think we have a photo, but they live under it. It protects them from if there was a car crash there, and gives them shade during the day. They're starting to prepare for the monsoon. Some stay, and they put their plastic there, and then they roll it out from the wall. It's just that space.
The culture in India is such that the government doesn't, point to people and say you're illegal and then treat them badly and kick them out and so on. The government says, these are people, this is the way they live. We have to essentially protect them, or we're not going to.
So the mixed
Unless they start running around stealing things and so on, that's what they would store, but they don't.
Here's a hammock underneath it. So they occupy the whole.
So they don't go inside the bus? But
No, the inside's closed. I mean, yeah, they can't go inside, but under.
Yeah.
That was kind of a montage that the students made that showed the kind of life of the street. And then they built a model that was pretty neat, but it started with just that L of space. Or they occupy a sewer pipe, also for the baby. Yeah, that was so the altered urbanism. So 2 cities to add to the Gedged that we had.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Quick thing, any questions?
I have some words about closing. It's so sad, these images, because I'm pretty familiar with this issue, particularly different types of property ownership. And there's a literature on it, specific literature on it. And maybe we can imagine top 3 freehold property type in the United States. You know, if you have a land property, it means that you have all the things underground and you have all the things. It's so secure. And look at the bottom, it's payment developers. They're not homes. They're developers, but they develop on the surface of the payment. So it's so, and also the other levels are interesting because we begin from the payment level and then the tenant of illegal squatter settlement.
Structures.
Yeah, and then tenant of legalized gece condos, and so on. Yeah. Imagine the other many levels. So maybe the most I don't know, the biggest problem is feeling that pressure policy can come anytime you know end up your situation. You know, it's so
precarious.
Yeah, it's so fragile, and knowing that is so, I don't know, it's a pressure. Because property phenomena is something related to people's positions relatively to your position. If they have a permission that you have that one, that means that it's your property. But if the society don't read that it's yours, you know, it's not a property, it's not a real property. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But they, it's true, India is, you know, the country of Gandhi. And that sort of Gandhi's way he was, he didn't come from, he didn't just invent that. That's in the culture. So that's a good thing. And so the police don't come to those street dwellers that are across the street from us.
Well, they did something.
Yeah, but they don't beat them up.
No.
At all. They provided housing for them. So it was not particularly. No, it's clean housing and so on and so forth. But my job is like 50 miles away, and I didn't go there every day. So,
There's a book that is starting to read called The Precariat. So it's the word is a combination of precarious and proletariat. And I think you might have talked a little bit about that, but just like the Gece Kondu have, Jen, your mother introduced us to a man who was part of a group to protect his Gece Kondu neighborhood. And I know that there are all these things here with Gece Kondu. Also here, there are different groups that have those houses near the railway, and they work with the railway ministry, and they become specialized at fighting for their rights. And they get lawyers and not-for-profit groups, and so there's a whole establishment of you know, being kind of a proletariat, you called it something else today, the network of solidarity.
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 Well, I was driving, I guess we were in Bijou's car, driving to Bijou, we were going somewhere. And there was a person on the sidewalk, you know, in the US we call it a homeless person. And I said, something about how do they get permission to be there? They said, well, let's sort of work it out and so on and so forth. And he said they sort of kind of buy that spot on the street, on the sidewalk. I said, really? I said, like that thing right there where the person is, how much would that cost? And they said, well, I mean, he I don't know, had asked questions before to this sort of thing. He said, that's probably about $16,000 for the right to live on the sidewalk.
Is it, but who they pay? Like
The
mafia or?
no, they would pay somebody owns the building that they're next to, or it's their wall.
But some also with the mafia.
Early commerce, yeah. Maybe early legals.
So, but, yeah, I don't know. We're not being that coherent to you, but maybe. But one of the things, the great things that you can do in your life as a designer, as an architect, is use your eyes wherever you go and see things. Because, like if you're a musician, I don't know, you walk around the city and I don't know, you can hear the sounds and then you say that's music and blah blah blah. There have been some that made use of that, but for the most part that doesn't help you. Or if you're a mathematician, that doesn't help you. And so on. But we walk around in our profession. It's everywhere. Everywhere is architecture, and you can just feast your eyes on the stuff. And there's often some really great things to see, learn from. And they're not obvious, but like the way somebody put wood on the thing, whatever the color, et cetera, et cetera. And especially, much more so in a city like this than in Los Angeles. Maybe if you came to Los Angeles, you would have just the opposite. You say, God, this is a great place. My eyes are looking at everything, and I'm learning so much. And there's probably some truth there, but there's so much to, it's like you do your research in architecture every day. You just get up in the morning and walk through the city, and there's all this stuff to see. And the color things. Big deal.
Yeah, our workshop group flipped out of the color. This yellow color was just, wow. All right, thank you, Sue.
Great. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Where did you get your white long shirt?
This?
Yeah.
This is.
It's from this paint. Paint
No,
drawing?
it's more of just a traditional men's.
Yeah.
But it's so suited to the climate. It's just the only thing you can wear.
Did it work well here? Also? Maybe we should start wearing those also.
Was it good here? But it's really hot.
Yeah. It's pure cotton.
Yeah.
Good cotton. And, yeah.
Yeah, the first day we take our students to Mumbai, we take them to the shop. And they all check that out.
Yeah.
I actually had a question about those walls that you said the government inserted in various places in Beijing. So they block and like it's a threshold between different things, right? Like different neighborhoods, different kinds.
Yes. Sometimes it's like 4 rows of trees to hide it. So like our village is right by the airport expressway, so everyone coming into the city could look down on it, except they planted 4 rows of trees on both sides. And so you just feel like you're coming into this garden city. It's totally under the radar.
But not only the trees, but
The
they also
walls.
say that
The
there's
walls.
white walls.
Yes,
Like how long they are and who builds that?
the government.
Like, is it all around the city?
That was a little bit unusual, because I think there they were camouflaging it with
But
the
There's
the
a
golf club
road,
next
there's a
door.
road that goes from the airport to the center of the city. And the city, China, go back not that many years, and China is like nowhere. You know, when we first started going there in 1992, 93, 94, there are no cars. There are no cars in the city. There are no taxis. I mean, that's not that long ago, you know, 15, 17, 18 years ago. And, you know, and they suddenly just like boom, 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 all this stuff happens. And they, but the government is sort of insecure.
But it does not really block the passage, so you can pass there, but you don't see it.
Perfect, yeah, it's staggered in just a brilliant way, so you don't see it and you go in.
So the government thinks that the foreigner that comes is going to look at this stuff and think, oh, these are slums and blah, 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 that's bad. PR for
Yeah.
thing. So that's why they
Disguise
do
it.
that.
But do that stop the people living in those slums going?
No,
But
no, they're totally transparent borders, because they work out there and then come back.
Yeah.
But if you, I've never called any of those urban village or slums.
No,
But we did, but because they're, you know, they're concrete foundations, brick walls about this thick. The buildings are not shoddy in any possible way, and they'll be there for a long time. And so they're just urban villages.
and
Sorry. And one of the beautiful things about the urban villages, and there's like a zillion in all the cities, is that it's this cushion for people that are migrating to the city. They don't have to sleep on the streets and blah, 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 because they know people through other people. In how many urban villages are there in Beijing?
There were 800.
800. So you go in and you have, in a sense, you have friends through friends of friends of friends. And you ease your way into the city.
Is there more to your question?
one last thing
I have
actually.
a question, by the way. If you don't mind, because
Yeah, there was one last small thing.
okay.
Like in again Beijing, you showed this the same size of the land. When there's a big building there, it's occupied by less people and it's more expensive. Did you do any kind of architectural like documentation on the urban village about how can it like contain that many people and it's still architecturally better quality than that? So
No, I mean, it's been happening so fast, but I think we'd love to do some drawings about that. It could be really, really beautiful. See the cells, the rooms, and the sections.
I was thinking about Beijing and these urban villages. They're like in the city center, and they're it's a cool neighborhood. Like there are like these five-star hotels nearby, and residential spaces. So two different classes maybe. Is there any like I don't know public spaces where they
Where they interact.
or they just pass by each other?
Unfortunately, not so much. I have to say, even the artists, the wealthy artists that live in our neighborhood live in the lower part. And they do sometimes start to go into the restaurants. But the migrants, there are also a lot of art galleries, really like a Swiss art, really high class galleries selling work for hundreds of thousands of dollars. The migrants feel they're not allowed to go there. So except like I said, also the urban villages, other people from the city, when they live in those tall buildings, they do go for entertainment. Some of them that are near those communities where upper class people are living, they cater to their needs. So they have the nail salon, the video parlors. Ours is an art village, so I'm speaking more about that. But now I'm rethinking the answer to your question. I think they do really produce these places of mixing chambers of the two classes. Because entrepreneurially, in an entrepreneurial way, the villages cater to those needs of those communities.
Because when we talk about like Turkey,
Yeah.
more suburb,
Yeah.
it's always about the poor people getting out of the city center.
Right.
But there it's just the opposite.
The opposite, right.
But still, there isn't any actually enough insight or.
China experimented with Toki-like housing and relocation housing, but they only did a few projects and then they realized they could meet these urban villages. We've been watching this develop and we saw them build one near us and it didn't kind of work. I think they're kind of realizing, maybe won't make the same mistake that so many places in the world have. Relocation
A
housing.
lot of people in the surrounding area from Beijing, at least, that's mostly what we know. The men and women come to the city to work, but they go back to their village, rural village. But it's not that, it takes an hour and a half bus or something. It's for the weekend, and their kids, are being raised by their grandparents, the kids' grandparents. But it's sort of assumed that they don't have their mother and father with them. But then in China, that's what it always was. The parents were working out in the fields in the daytime. They would come back maybe late at night after the kids would gone to sleep, but the grandparents were raising the kids. So it's not so different today. And they,
Have you seen any similarities between these three cities, Mumbai, Beijing, and Istanbul? Like living, gecekondu's,
I think the Gecekondu are a lot like the urban villages, and especially with the Gece apartments.
Yes.
It's a very similar phenomenon. And to me, to us, the Gecekondu neighborhoods are kind of rural and urban at the same time. Mumbai less so. I think Mumbai's more different.
Okay.
I think there's more similarity with
Yeah.
Beijing.
Beijing.
Yeah. Another group in Beijing we didn't tell you about is that all those high buildings, another group we've been studying, is called the mouse tribe or the rat tribe. So every mid-rise housing building in Beijing, by law, has to have it's on the poster. I don't think I brought that file.
Huh? Which poster?
Oh, I thought you were going to pull up the ant tribe. But no. But the image on the left on the poster is of that. So underneath there's a parking garage, and then there's bomb shelter. Several stories of bomb
But
shelter.
why do they have a bomb shelter?
Because it's
The U.S. is going to bomb them.
Yeah, the threat.
Yeah. I mean, they really felt that was.
So Chairman Mao made
Because
a law.
the Chinese are commie bastards.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
most people in the U.S. think the Chinese are cheats and communists and terrible people.
Well, in the 50s, all the families in our neighborhoods, we didn't have one, but they had bomb shelters. So it'd be like the playhouse, like we'd go down there and pretend, they had ventilation things, nuclear wars. In the 50s and 60s in the US.
In the U.S.
Yeah.
But in the garages, by law, you have to have a bomb shelter.
Under the parking garage.
But
But actually in Turkey, you have
Oh,
bomb shelters.
Okay.
okay.
but they, the force of the population overrides the rules and regulations and so on.
So they're owned by the army.
But they're all
Bomb
occupied.
But then they get rented to one landlord, another landlord, another landlord. I'm going to use it for storage. I'm going to use it for storage. The fourth landlord, the chain is too deep. People, so they're teeming lives going on underground. It's absolutely amazing.
And there's some films that, what is that?
There's one film called, it's where we first sort of learned about them. wasted life or something like that.
Even on the internet, you can find it, but it's
Stolen.
people that live underground.
Why did you go to China?
Because there was more for me than
No, also me.
Marion. But we were, the liberal, I guess the liberal educated, blah, 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 so, it was basically anti-capitalist.
And being in Berkeley in the 1960s.
1960s. and in Union Square in the 1970s, that we, and up the street from Union Square, on Fifth Avenue, there's a bookstore. There's a famous bookstore, Barnes and Noble, but there's another bookstore that basically has socialist, communist books. That's all they have. You know, and it's been there for like 50, 60, 70
And
years.
posters, great graphics and posters. And, you know, Andy Warhol was right up the street, and his kind of Chairman Mao things sort of came out of that.
Yeah.
So Chairman Mao was for us sort of a hero. We didn't know the whole history and the difficulties and the craziness, but he was like women's rights. Women hold up half the sky.
No matter what he did badly, he's not as bad as Trump.
Yeah. He was always kind of romantic. We had this romantic relationship to it, and you know, like you go to Japan all the time. And a lot of our friends just love Japan, and the aesthetic there. I mean, it's unbelievable. But I guess our aesthetic is a little more funky Chinese. How do you say it? Sort of make do. It just was very interesting to us. And then, but then we met these artists, and all these other kinds of things just sort of added on to that.
But how did we get there first?
We were going to open a branch of SciArc in the 1990s in China. So we toured 3 cities, Nanjing, Beijing, Shanghai. And the architectural education at that point was too far behind. SciArc's the most radical, you know, it's crazy radical LA school. And it would have been too much of a shock for the system. We really wanted to do it, but we waited, and then we did base Beijing. We always say, then we were a little too late. We could have probably come.
But when we first went there, we got introduction to the university.
University, all the universities.
What's it called? Wasn't Beijing University?
Tongji and Tsinghua.
We talked about the program. They said, "Oh, we'll give you some space. You can have it right here at the university." But what was this?
Oh, the universities are like mental institutions. They just feel like they're just being institutionalized, and we couldn't have SciArc in a place like that. The space that
Plus it was now it's not in the middle of the city, but it's really in the city.
That's what was in farmland.
Tongji or
Tsinghua University.
Tsinghua University.
It's like way out.
It's like the university in Beijing. And they said, "Oh, God, we'll give you a studio space and blah blah blah." And so we're looking at it. We're not even in the city. At that time, you weren't in the city, and there were no cabs. They had no cars, and so that didn't work. And then we ended up. We had somebody. This is a story that takes about 4 hours, which I won't tell. We had somebody, Bernard Webb, this aristocratic English person that was taken in by Gandhi when he was in India, and it goes on and on and on. I won't tell the story. But we got hooked up with him, and he said, "You got to come to China. I know the Minister of Construction, and I know the."
I wrote the housing policy for China.
Housing policy for China.
Yeah, just
Blah
weird
blah blah.
connections.
And all it was all more or less true.
It's
And
bizarre.
so we got that.
So he said they need to introduce steel construction. They were building all in just concrete reinforcement. And they said, we've only built a 3-story building. It's our biggest building. Like, go talk to SOM or something.
Yeah.
Corporate firm, but we got together an engineering team, Swiss and
But he said,
American.
I know that. He said, but you're much
You'll get
closer to the.
They like professors. They'll like you better than the SOM. They don't like these corporate people. So a lot of the people that do work in China, they're more kind of down to earth and teachers. And so we put together an engineering team, and we actually had a lot of meetings in the Ministry of Construction.
Right.
And during that time, I mean, we donated a little bit of effort, but it transformed. Now, of course, they're doing top-notch steel construction. So that was part of what we lived through, the change. just in like 15 years, 12 years or something. Yeah, lots of reasons.
Last question? No. I'm kind of coming back to the same bit, maybe, but I'm so into the philosophy of occupying space, the property ownership. I don't know how you want to call it, but I think I don't know. It depends on your position, the ideological position. Maybe there's two different ways to understand people's instinct to have something on the earth. You know? Especially, I refer to the property, almost of land. So I wonder your opinion and your solution for this instinct. Is it the thing that people need to have something in their life to live forever and maybe give it back to their children and so on? Or is it just to hold somewhere for living, you know, or to just occupy it, you know? Because there's a property term and also there's a possession, or I prefer canoe because it comes from French. The root means tenir, it's to hold, it's just, and it's insecure, by the way. Of course, a guy who is more powerful than you comes and take it from you, you know? So, yeah.
So I think the book I mentioned before, The Precariat, that I feel more and more all of us are becoming precariats. It's a new class, a new society, because of the environment, because of economies, because of stupid world leaders and all sorts of things. And that, I guess, what I love about engaging places like this is that it helps me learn to be perhaps more precarious, that I learn to live with that. We told the story in our workshop of Charles and Ray Eames. We're doing a documentary film on an aquarium, and they were hired to do a film to help promote the aquarium. And during that work, they learned that there are two types of sea creatures. You can divide them into two categories. It's a weird word, pelagic and non-pelagic. And the pelagic ones, they're always like staking out their territory and making sure they get enough food and always on the defensive. The precarious ones are like squid and jellyfish, and they just float, and then some little shrimps come along and they go in their mouth. And so the Eames got very interested in that kind of non-pelagic, and they said, we are non-pelagic designers. It helped them define their design philosophy, and I think that's something we feel like we're always learning from
Mumbai
this.
and China, because even with the laws, you know, if you consider the differences between the Western culture and the Eastern culture, maybe it's too much generalized, overgeneralized. But still, as you told in your presentation, we are just talking about a type of property ownership. Maybe the exact term must be leasing, because property ownership only for 49 years or that was 19 years. It's so cool. It's just, I don't know, there is no human nature that we have to believe that we all need property.
Yeah.
And they don't care about the properties, they just know that they occupy there for a life.
China's kind of interesting because nobody owns property.
Yeah,
And
in China.
there's something healthy about that. And it sort of equalizes things. Some people get more and more control over more things and buildings, and they own buildings. You pay a rent on the property, but you own the building. And so that's a major investment. It's a capitalist. Yeah. What? And here's the good thing and the bad thing. You all are sort of in the architecture profession. The profession is in many ways, a loser, except for what you do, which is both interesting, fun to do it, interesting to do it, meaningful, et cetera, but it's not like being a doctor or even an engineer. I don't know about here, how well people are paid, but in the US, architects are paid like zilch. But it's a community, and you're part of that community. That holds it together. As opposed to being on your own, you're not on your own. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay.